Close Up in Class looks at Obamacare. Mark, is it the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that citizens have access to health care coverage?
I think it is. I think there are certain basic human rights that a government should provide to all of its citizens. Very basic things: food, shelter, education, and health care. No child or adult should die in a country because they don't have enough to eat. No one should be left out in the elements to die in the cold. Everyone gets an education because education is the only route out of poverty, the only significant route out of poverty. And finally, yes, healthcare, easily preventable diseases. I talked about the fact that 35 nations provide every citizen the right to healthcare. Now, there are some poor countries that don't do that, but we're the richest nation on earth. We can afford it. So I think there's a moral reason. I don't think that someone born rich should get to live and someone born poor should have to die. That doesn't make sense to me morally. But it also makes sense as a matter of economic fairness. In other words, an economy can't grow if we have to deal with people who are sick all the time from easily preventable diseases. Right now, for example, if you have a heart attack, they will take care of you in the emergency room. And it might cost $100,000 and they cut your chest open and you suffer for 2 or 3 years. But just getting heart medication might cost $100 a month rather than $100,000 with a heart attack. So prevention is much, much cheaper. It's one of the reasons why these other countries pay far less than they do in healthcare.
In 1965, when they created Medicare and then the next year with Medicaid, the 2/3 majorities of the Democrats in both houses of Congress, with Lyndon Johnson pushing for both of those bills, didn't believe the federal government had the constitutional authority to provide health care coverage for everybody. The reason Medicare was created as an adjunct to the Social Security Act was it was a part of Social Security. Medicaid, the way they did that was they basically have the federal government reimbursing the states if the states will pay for medical care, which the states have the constitutional authority to do. So in 1965 and 1966, it wasn't even a question whether the federal government had this authority. The answer was no, and that was with 2/3 Democrat majority. And so I would point to the Constitution and say the federal government doesn't have that authority under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that delineates what the federal government is allowed to do. We do, in fact, provide health care for people. The term health care coverage implies health insurance, and I think that's where you get into the question of we can provide health care and do so voluntarily, out of charity, if you will, but we're not constitutionally required, and it isn't a responsibility of the federal government.